want to thank everyone for this opportunity again to explain T.R.A.I.N. It's not an easy reform, and one of the key questions is whether T.R.A.I.N. or the tax reform is responsible for the slight increase in inflation. So I would just like to give a short presentation, and Asek Paula and I would be happy to answer questions. Just to give everyone an idea, the inflation is really based on a consumer price basket. This is the composition of that basket. 39% of that is food, and 59% is non-food. And under food, you would have food, and under food, you would have rice, which is the biggest item in the basket, followed by the non-alcoholic beverages and the alcohol and tobacco. In the non-food, you have the usual clothing, housing, electricity, transport, and so on. So there are many items in the consumption basket, and this is arrived based on a survey of what typical Filipinos buy. And those highlighted in yellow are those that would typically be affected by the tax reform, which I will explain later has not yet translated into the inflation effect. The key messages as we see in January is that the year-on-year inflation was 3.95%. That is the almost 4% that is being reported. Year-on-year inflation meaning the change in price between January of 2017 and January of 2018. And the main findings is that it is within the 2 to 4% target of the central bank. And this is considered moderate. Although it is at the higher end, it is still within target. And 1 month of slightly higher inflation is not a cause for concern because the target is set for the entire year. And what makes the January a little higher is that the base effect is present, meaning sa January 2017, the inflation was quite low at 2.7. That is why there is room to grow the price. In NCR, 5.45 yung inflation. But outside NCR, it's really lower, 3.53. Because the poor and the low income are mostly outside NCR, we don't think that this inflation is a major concern for our low income countrymen. Some of you may ask if the 4% or 3.95 is high. It is actually very low and stable. Historically, we have gone through 10%, 20%, and even 50% inflation. So this chart basically says that over time, we have been doing quite well in making our inflation low and stable. So at 3.2 last year and 3.95 this year, we expect that to remain within the central bank's target. And so this is not a cause for concern. Now, some of you may ask, and to educate the public, kailan ba kinukuha ng survey ng Philippine Statistics Authority? They do it twice a month, during the first 5 days of the month and during the middle of the month. And given this, T.R.A.I.N. is unlikely to be the reason for the higher inflation that we have seen. Why? Because most of these firms selling alcohol, tobacco, sugar-sweetened beverage, oil are still selling old stock, which they bought in 2017 and should not be levied the higher excise. So if there is any higher inflation that we have seen, it's probably due to other reasons. In fact, what we see is that in petroleum, although the inflation of petroleum products is 7.2%, none of that was caused by T.R.A.I.N. because the peso's depreciation is 1.5% and the Dubai crude increased by 19.6%. In fact, if we look at month-on-month inflation, meaning the change in price from December to January, we actually saw it to be slightly negative at 0.8. So there's no way for T.R.A.I.N. to have caused the higher petroleum products. In fact, it is due to the peso's depreciation and the higher Dubai crude. Sugar-sweetened beverage, mababa rin yung inflation, 2.8%. Alcohol, we expect it to rise 4% kasi in sin tax every year may 4% adjustment, pero mababa rin siya. So yung main message is, if these products that are affected by T.R.A.I.N. hardly increase, and the only reason why petroleum increase is a Dubai crude, and all other products increase, there must be something else that's driving the increase, and not T.R.A.I.N. That is the key message. Now, in terms of food, what we have seen is that overall food inflation is higher at 4.52%. However, rice is still low as of January at 1.4%. In fact, the only product in the food basket that is higher than 10%, which is a cause for concern, is fish. However, that reflects the typhoon that went through the middle of the country in December and also yung close fishing season. Typically, November to February, hindi pwede mag-fish ng big fish variety. Now, actually, what we think is the real driver of higher inflation, aside from possible profiteering, is that the tobacco industry is now paying the right taxes. Tobacco inflation actually in January was 17.4% when we expect it only to increase by 8%. And this is likely to be due to one company which is now paying the right taxes after being caught smuggling and producing illicit cigarette. In fact, that company, under the new management, is now paying almost 2 billion more per month. In fact, if we had the situation wherein that company would still be producing illicit cigarette, therefore not paying tax, and we would see our inflation to be 3.75, which is more or less the norm that we expect. But since someone is now complying and paying the right tax, we see higher prices and thus contributed to inflation. Our estimate, as many of you have seen in previous presentation, is that we expect the T.R.A.I.N to contribute a maximum of only 0.7% to our inflation. So if the target inflation on average is 3% this year, it would be 3.7 maximum. And the 0.7 is due to T.R.A.I.N. And NEDA and the BSP both have confirmed our analysis. Finally, many of you know that we came from a period of very high oil price. And then oil price went down and started to go up in the last 3 years. What really happened was when diesel increased from 18 pesos to 32 pesos between January of 2016 and January of 2017, that 14 peso is at 76% increase in the diesel price. We did not see any of the key commodity items skyrocket. Inflation overall in 2016 was 2.7%. Food inflation 3.4%. Transport 2.4%. Housing, electricity, gas, water 1.8%. In fact, based on the survey that DTI does every month on the price, they did not see any significant increase, if any, among the key products. Laundry bars, sardines, pork, rice, yellow corn, fish, noodles, lahat po sila hindi po nagbago. Habang yung diesel, umakyat na po ng 14 pesos. So, in summary, I would like to assure the public that this T.R.A.I.N has been well studied, well consulted, and the inflation very well manageable. We have also other ways to help the poor in case inflation goes up higher. We have the conditional cash transfer. We have the rice subsidy. We have under the T.R.A.I.N the unconditional cash transfer. And we are pursuing rice tarification so that rice price will fall by NEDA's estimate by up to 7 pesos per kilogram. So with that, ASEC Paul and I would be happy to address questions regarding T.R.A.I.N and its inflation effect, if any.